Bucks Hawks game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals tonight. Milwaukee looking for a third straight win. Atlanta looking to avoid a 3-1 hole. Here to lay down their best bets for this thriller is DraftKings contributor Julian Edlow, Rotowire NBA editor Nick Whalen, and host of the Four Seasons podcast for Ball is Life, Ryan Magdziarz. So guys, Chris Middleton was the main character on Sunday, propelled the Bucks to a 2-1 series lead. So for game 4 tonight, the Bucks are 7-point road favorites. Jules, with an injured Trae Young, do you think the Bucks can cover and take both games in Atlanta?
Yeah, it certainly didn't look the same for Trae Young when he got back into that game. Now we have to see how he recovered these last couple of days, but the updates also aren't good. It looked like an ankle roll, obviously, but now it's a bone bruise in the foot. Maybe it's some kind of combination in there. He's going to play. He's going to play and battle through it. But we've seen guys, James Harden, Anthony Davis, play through injuries that they normally would not be playing through in this postseason. And in Anthony Davis's case, almost hurt his team. In Harden's case, give them a body on the floor, but not be the guy that he needed to be. Now, in the Nets case, they had Kevin Durant on the floor and could still at least gut through the rest of the series. If Trae Young looks, limited, I don't think he'll be as bad as Harden. But if Trae Young's not Trae Young, Atlanta's not going anywhere. That's just the way it is. So the full game makes me a little nervous. It's a lot of points at home. But the Hawks, outside of last game when they came out hot and the Bucks came back, the Hawks have been one of the slowest starting teams in the postseason, one of the worst shooting first quarter teams in the postseason. The Bucks have been a team that has generally come out hot, and then whether they win the game or not, Coach Bud has had some collapses late in games. But for me, I am looking at the Bucks first quarter here, one that I went to earlier in the series, I think for game 2 that came through. Just lay the 2.5 points. I think the Bucks get off to a good start here, and Young might have some cobwebs to shake off, even if he does get going later in the game when the foot loosens up.
Nick, what do you think? Can the Bucks cover and take both games in Atlanta?
I think they can. I think game 3 finally showed us something about this Bucks team that we hadn't seen a ton of throughout the playoffs. And that was some resiliency, the ability to weather a storm, where it felt like Atlanta was playing about as well as it possibly could have through that first half. And I think Milwaukee was down by as much as 11 or 13 at times. And, instead of folding when the 3-pointers weren't falling, when things weren't going their way, they kept it close. They hung around. And finally, at the end, you get the big fourth quarter from Chris Middleton, which, of course, was coupled with the Trae Young injury to pull away. And I think, assuming Trae Young is not at 100%, I think he plays in this game, but I don't think we're going to get like 48-point Trae Young from game 1 of this series. I think he's going to be a little bit limited. The big kicker here is that Bogdanovic is also limited. If Trae Young's going to be at, say, 80%, you need Bogdanovic to kind of step up and be your main ball handler, main creator. He was a lot more aggressive, I thought, in game 3, but 3 of 16 from the field just doesn't really seem to have it with that knee issue that he's been nursing since midway through the Sixers series. So not only is your best guy banged up in Trae Young, but the guy who you would need to step up in place of him is also banged up. And I think that's where Atlanta could really run into some trouble here. Like Julian said, I think I like Milwaukee to kind of sense the moment, sense that they have a real chance to take control of this series and then come back home and finish it out on Thursday. So I like the Bucks to jump out to an early lead. I think there's also a case to be made that at some point the shooting comes around for Milwaukee. I mean, they're shooting 32% from 3 as a team. They've been the worst team in the playoffs in terms of wide open 3-point shooting, dating all the way back to round 1. They're under 35% on wide open threes. A part of the issue is they just don't have a ton of great shooters. But at some point, Bryn Forbes is going to have one of those like 4 for 7 games, or Pat Connaughton could get hot like he did at the end of the Brooklyn series. So, it was a big win for Milwaukee in game 3 because it didn't feel like they played all that well for most of that game. It feels like they have another level to go up, and I think we could see that tonight.
Yeah, Ryan, where do you sit on this one?
Yeah, this all revolves around Trae Young to me. Obviously, his ankle, he's going to have almost 48 hours to recover from this. He wears ankle braces. He always has. I think it's not going to be that bad. I'm banking on the narrative that Trae Young is going to be okay. It looked like a slight roll. Now, granted, Jules did mention he didn't look like himself when he came back, and I agreed. He looked very different. Partnered with Middleton going nuclear in the fourth. I think that was just too much burden in the fourth quarter. But I think 7 might be too much if Trae is completely healthy. And when I say completely healthy, 80% I'm hoping for. But yeah, Bogdanovic not being banged up, and he looks not even 50% right now. And taking 16 shots, I think, is too many shots for him last in game 3. So I'm keeping my eye on Trae Young. If Trae Young is 80% at least, I think 7 is too much for the spread.
All right, guys, game 4's total is set at 219. Now, the total has hit the under in 7 of Milwaukee's last 10 games. It's gone under in 4 of Atlanta's last 5 home games against Milwaukee. Plus, we're already talking about it. We got Trae Young dealing with an injury. Bogdan still dealing with his knee. Giannis probable with that calf. I mean, Nick, do you have to take the under here?
I think you do. I mean, the number was at 221 last night, and now it's actually down to 218.5 on the DK Sportsbook. So it continues to fall. You know, at some point, obviously, you'd have to consider going over, but I'm kind of on the opposite side of Ryan here, right? Like I said, I think Trae Young is going to play, but I worry about how effective he's going to be. I mean, it was very clear that he was favoring that ankle, when he checked back into the game around the 9-minute mark in game 3. And yes, he does have two full days, to get it where it needs to be. But if he's not carrying this offense, they just have trouble scoring. I mean, they were under 100 points in game 2. They certainly didn't pull their weight in terms of hitting the over in game 3. I think Milwaukee, scores enough points where you'd feel good about going over, but I think this could end up looking a lot like game 2, which was a 125 to 91 game. And, if the Hawks don't have that engine of their offense, and again, we keep harping on Bogdanovic being hurt. With those two guys banged up, the options kind of thin out pretty quickly.
Yeah, Ryan, where do you sit on this one?
Nick mentioned it. It keeps going down. I took the over because it got to 219. The role players is what I'm looking at also from game 3. Drew Holiday shot 2 for 11. Red Velvet shot 4 for 11. And Bogdanovic chucked up 16 shots, only made 3 of them. I think that the narrative is that Giannis, Middleton, and Trae all went bonkers and had great games, but the rest of the crew didn't do much. I don't think that the role players shoot as bad as they did in game 3. I'm taking over 219.
Jules, where are you going?
I lean to the under. The under was a popular play in Clippers and Suns game 5, and it did find its way over. That was one of those just kind of like Bucks and Nets that throughout the series, the teams get to know each other better and better. Guys are more dinged up. It's familiar matchups, and it just keeps going under and under, even with totals creeping down. So yeah, if Trae Young, if we're operating under the assumption, some of us, that Trae Young is not going to be healthy, it makes me lean to the under. But one other way that you can potentially look at this, I mean, you could go, if you think the Bucks are going to go off and Atlanta isn't, I mean, you probably just want to lay the 7 with the Bucks, but you could also go to the Atlanta Hawks team total under 105.5. If you look at their playoff games, in this series, 102, 91, they did hit the over in game 1. A lot of these game 1s have gone over, and then the familiarity starts to kick in, the adjustments. 103 in game 7 against Philly, 99 in game 6 against Philly, a slight over with 109 in game 5 against Philly, then 103. They've been, keeping it in the high 90s, low hundreds. And, again, got to see how healthy Young is. But one of the more telling things to me in that game wasn't necessarily even that he looked bad. You can do treatment and get better. But he was playing off the ball in that fourth quarter a lot, which, I mean, Trae Young always plays on the ball. He has the ball in his hands all the time. That's how the Hawks offense operates. So if he's dinged up enough, and again, he could be healthier, but if he's dinged up enough that he's not playing on the ball, that's a huge red flag for Atlanta. So I would say, outside of Bucks first quarter, which I will be playing, everything else I want to play live in this game, because I think we'll be able to tell, why gamble on Trae Young's health when we can just wait and see early. It'll probably be pretty evident, and then I'll feel a lot more comfortable, getting some money in on that game.
All right, well, I already mentioned how Chris Middleton went off, scored 38 points in game 3. So Ryan, does he stay hot, go over his listed point total of 23.5?
I'm going under 23.5 for Middleton. The previous 2 games, game 1 and game 2, he had 15. And again, the role guys is what I'm looking at, because Drew Holiday showed up in those games. Bobby Portis played decently in those games. Bryn Forbes didn't shoot 1 for 6 in game 1 and 2. So I think it was a little bit of an outlier. The Bucks absolutely needed Middleton to win that game, because the Hawks came out hot. They were up, I think, as much as 14 points in some parts of the game. But the Hawks will make adjustments, I feel like. And 23.5 on average for Middleton seems high, despite the game 3 nuclear in Middleton.
All right, Jules, what do you think? Do you want to go under this mark?
Yeah, I lean towards the under on Middleton. He's been a little bit worse on the road in the postseason, at least from a shooting standpoint. Sometimes he can get there on volume, which is a little scary. You have the potential blowout factor, I guess. Again, that's operating under the assumption that Young isn't healthy and the Bucks can build up a big lead in this game, which is no given. For me, just to give out a more comfortable one, like Giannis on the three-way prop, points, rebounds, and assists. I believe that's at 51.5. Let me just check and make sure that I'm right. Yeah, 51.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Giannis is 14-1 to the under on that number in this postseason. His only over is a overtime game 7 against the Nets. It's a lot. It's a lot, even with him rebounding well. So I kind of lean to the under on the 51.5 with Giannis as the top player prop. And keep an eye out on DK Sportsbook, because a little birdie told me that there might be an odds boost on a Giannis double-double from -500 to close to even money. So you can just play that on Giannis to make some money.
Wow, a little birdie named Julian Edlow. Nick.
I'm not the birdie. Somebody told me. I'm just sharing with you.
Okay. Yeah, great. No, thank you. Appreciate that.
No problem.
We love to get an inside track. Nick, what do you think for Middleton? Does he go over or under 23.5?
I wish I had some like insider knowledge to drop here, but that's a good note by Julian. I mean, Giannis has been automatic as a double-double guy in these playoffs, so definitely take advantage of that. I think I have to go under. I think this is a really good line. There's been a few times that we've talked on this show throughout the postseason where it feels like some of the lines will maybe be a little bit of an exaggeration based on what happened the previous game. I wouldn't be shocked if the line was like 26.5 for Middleton. And in that case, I would definitely take the under. 23.5 is such a good line because he's been right at 23 a few times in these playoffs. He hasn't had back-to-back big games, though, in the playoffs. You know, his best back-to-back performances were 25 against Brooklyn in Game 5, and then that big 38-point performance in Game 6. But then after that, he goes down to 23 points, then 15 in Game 1 against Atlanta, 15 in Game 2 against Atlanta. And then he's back up with 38 points, 20 of which come in the fourth quarter. So, for the most part, he's been fairly inconsistent throughout these playoffs. When he's running hot, he's running really hot, but he hasn't really been able to string together multiple great games in a row. So I think I do shade towards the under a little bit here. I'd almost be a little more comfortable going over on Chris Middleton, 6.5 rebounds. He has gone over that number in 4 of his last 5 games. He has like 6 double-digit rebounding games throughout the playoffs. Not necessarily a guy that you think of as a great rebounder, but those numbers have been there.
All right, so on the Hawks side, we know Trae Young dealing with that ankle issue. Jules, keeping that in mind, are you going to lean under on his point total of 27.5?
I will. I can't play an over on Trae Young tonight. That just doesn't seem smart. But again, looking, and let's see. Oh, he doesn't even have. All right, so he doesn't even. Oh, there we go. 39.5 points, rebounds, and assists. So generally with the ankle injury, that might affect his rebounding, which at times, he can pull down a lot of boards. And then the assists, like I said, playing off the ball would hurt that if that does come into play again to kind of get him some rest while he's on the floor almost. So they're going to need him to score to keep them in this game. So maybe I'm thinking like if he's playing off the ball, maybe he gets some looks for 3. He did hit 1 3 when he came back with the ankle injury. I think it was on a catch and shoot. So maybe he's playing a little bit more like Steph Curry and some of that off the ball role and can get a couple threes and maybe get close to the point total. So I think the safer play is just the under on everything combined, because the ankle will affect the rebounding. The ankle could affect his ability to handle the ball as much and get those assists. So I think putting all the volume together and playing the under makes a little more sense to me.
Nick, over or under 27.5?
I'm with Julian going under. I think that's the safer play here, although I wouldn't be shocked if this does go over, and it would, to me, that would have to be like kind of an inefficient, I should say, night from Trae Young, where he's launching a ton of threes. I don't think we can depend on him to get to the line 12 times like he did in game one. I think that's maybe where we see that ankle, become more of an issue, where he's not able to drive off of it and plant and get to the hole. He's maybe not comfortable landing awkwardly on a contested layup. If he goes over this number, it's probably because he has to settle for a lot of threes and he hits a lot of those threes. So that to me is somewhat of a risky proposition. He had 6 threes in the last game, but he was 1 of 8 in game 2. And I think Trae Young still has this almost like Steph Curry light reputation where he could fill it up from anywhere. And on any given night, that is true. But on the whole, he's closer to like a 35% 3-point shooter. He's not this elite, like 40 plus 3-point shooter, I think, like a lot of people think of him. So, factoring in the ankle, I think you have to err on the side of caution here. I'll be going under, but I still expect him to be aggressive, just maybe in different ways than we've seen so far in this series.
What do you think, Ryan? You want to take the over?
I can't take the over. He got in there and didn't look the same. But I do think that, he's 6'1". I would guess $170-ish. It's not a lot of torque going on his ankles. And it's different if you're talking about a wing or a big with their ankle. I mentioned he always wears ankle braces. Ankle braces kind of brace the tweaks and those small turns. And he has 48 hours of recovery. So I want so badly to be in on this narrative that he's going to be all right because I want a good series. I want him to go off. And Villain Trae is so fun to root for and watch. But I can't go over 27.5. And I won't be shocked if it happens, but just I can't bet my own money on 27.5.
All right, guys,
my favorite part of that analysis is that Ryan just said ankle braces brace your ankles.
Well, they do.
Not wrong.
I love it.
That's a fact. That is a fact. All right, guys, really quick. We have like 30 seconds. So bring it home. If you're playing DFS tonight, who's your captain for the showdown contest?
I like bounce back Drew Holiday, $14,100. I think it allows you to fit Trae and Giannis both in there. I don't think he's shooting 2 for 11 again.
Jules.
Yeah, I'll pay down from Giannis as well. I think, going the Holiday route or even going down to somebody like Bobby Portis and stacking out your flex makes sense if you want to go cheap. Captain DeMarcus Cousins worked well last night.